What up, gang? Today we're going to be ranking the top 40 wide receivers and putting them in tiers for fantasy football. If you don't know me, my name is Casey Luke. I've been working in the fantasy space for over 4 years, worked with all the biggest brands in this space, and even had a meeting with Austin Eckler last year to chat ball, so let's get right into the tier list. Make sure you read the key to know to where I have them ranked. Also, higher or lower than ECR just means my take versus the expert consensus rankings, as if there's any experts in fantasy football anyways. But hopping right into it, we got Puka Nacua, who was amazing last year. Now, I know he is doing some extremely stupid shit this offseason, so take that into account. If he ends up doing some crazy shit and getting suspended, obviously don't pick him number 1 overall, but he was amazing last year. And also in PPR leagues, he's an absolute monster. Just because he catches a ton of balls around the line of scrimmage, he'll be returning with Matthew Stafford once again. If his back becomes a problem once again this offseason, maybe monitor that. It's too early in the offseason really to tell, but he was insane last year, and I think he'll be great once again. He's still young. This is a can't miss pick at number 1 wide receiver, in my opinion. Puka's going to be a beast once again. Getting into the 2 spot, we have Ja'Marr Chase. Every time Joe Burrow's been healthy, he's been an absolute dog. I'm not going to overthink this pick. And T. Higgins also had 11 touchdowns last year. If some of those can start to swing Chase's way, he'll be even better once again for fantasy. This is one you just don't overthink. Their offensive line could get better throughout the offseason and with the draft. And if that ends up happening, I could see a world where Chase is the number 1 wide receiver overall like he has been before. Getting into the 3 spot, we got Jackson Smith and Jigba, who was amazing last year. Had a 34% target share, which is one of the highest of all time. And Sam Darnold should be returning once again. And I don't think they're really going to add a ton of competition. They re-signed Rashid Shaheed, which is honestly like a good hedge for them not signing any big marquee wide receivers. JSN, obviously one of the most talented players in the league, the Emerald City Route Specialist, which is the worst nickname I've ever seen. But this is going to be a great offense once again, and they literally didn't sign Kenneth Walker just so they could pay this man. The run game is probably going to be a little more of an afterthought than it was last year, and I think JSN will be a monster once again. You can't go wrong with any of these guys. That's why the S tier is the S tier. Now getting into the B tier, and this one may surprise a lot of people, but Justin Jefferson is actually at my number 4 spot, and hear me out. In 2024, he was the wide receiver 2, and I know last year was very bad, but listen, it was JJ McCarthy's fault, and I think we all know that. We know Justin Jefferson's not a bad wide receiver, and he barely scored any touchdowns, and I don't think that is a product of him. That is a product of JJ McCarthy being absolute shit. And I know Kyler Murray gets his flack, and trust me, I've been one of his biggest haters over the last couple years, but this guy has produced good wide receiver seasons for a lot of wide receivers. He had a good season with DeAndre Hopkins, and Trey McBride was one of the top tight ends in fantasy for the last couple of years. So I think Justin Jefferson will be good once again, and this is kind of my hot take of the offseason. I think he'll return to being top 5 after last season. And now with everyone sleeping on him, you can probably get him in the 2nd or 3rd round, which is just absolutely crazy for me. I will be smashing him at that value every single time. Pause. The 5 spot is CeeDee Lamb, and I don't think you need to overthink this one. This is one of the most talented wide receivers in the NFL and probably a top 3 offense. And Brian Schottenheimer constantly has these guys moving. They've ranked top 3 in pace the last couple of years. And even with George Pickens signing the franchise tag, I still think Lamb will be good once again. And I don't think it's really going to be the case scenario where George Pickens and CeeDee Lamb are neck and neck every year. I think Lamb will eventually take over that wide receiver 1 spot like he has before. This is a pick that you just don't need to overthink, and I think he'll be especially good in PPR leagues where he'll be catching a ton of balls around the line of scrimmage once again. But Amon-Ra St. Brown has been a top 5 receiver over the last 4 years, and I need that to settle in because that's one of the craziest stats of anyone I'm going to name today. Although I do hate the Drew Petzing signing, I think he's an absolute bum, but once again, we've seen multiple offensive coordinators come through here, and Amon-Ra has still finished top 5 every year, and there's a chance that Dan Campbell could be calling plays as well. So Amon-Ra, a guy that you really can't go wrong with. Once again, I always say you can lose your league in the 1st round, but you can't win it, and Amon-Ra is a guy that's just not going to lose your league. He'll be a top 10 wide receiver, and I don't really have any doubt in my mind about that one, and this offense should be great once again. Once we get some team totals out of Vegas, I can run back through, but I'm sure they are going to have a top 5 offense projected by the sportsbook, which will obviously signal them being great once again. So this one is a no-brainer in the late 1st, early 2nd round, but one that is not a no-brainer is Rashee Rice. Now, he is once again in some legal trouble, so something you definitely need to monitor this offseason, and I hope he gets that figured out because another suspension would absolutely break my heart, especially as a Chiefs fan. But as you can see, I have him 5 spots higher than ECR, which is something to note. He finished as a top 12 wide receiver in 5 of 8 games last year. When he was healthy, he was absolutely amazing, and he was a target funnel in this Chiefs offense because none of their other wide receivers could seem to separate. Now, there might be a chance that Justin Fields is starting over the 1st half of the year, but I'll take my chances with Patrick Mahomes being healthy week 1. They seem pretty optimistic about it, and there was like 4 games until the season actually ended, so he had a little extra time to heal there, and I know he got surgery really soon. So Rice is a guy that I'm excited about because if he can stay healthy for a full season and not do some stupid shit like he has been over the last couple of years, this guy's an absolute monster, and we've known it for multiple years. So a guy that I will be targeting personally in all my drafts, and also I love having Chiefs players on my team. As you guys know, having a player from your hometown hometown team is like, it's probably one of the best things in fantasy. It gives you something to look forward to. So maybe a little homer bias here, but I love Rashee Rice at 7, and it signals that in my ranking as I have him 5 spots higher than ECR. But getting into the next guy, we got George Pickens. Now, even when CeeDee Lamb was healthy last year, George Pickens was a wide receiver 1, which is pretty crazy to say. This offense was absolutely humming. They had Javonte Williams finish as a fringe RB1. They had George Pickens finish as a wide receiver 1. CD finish as a wide receiver 1. I'm sure Dak was a QB1 as well with all those numbers. But Pickens, we've known, absolute beast, just couldn't really get it done in Pittsburgh because of his terrible quarterback play, and now he does not have to worry about that. Dak Prescott and him had a great connection, especially in the red zone. So he just got franchise tagged by the Cowboys, so he'll likely be returning. And something to note is he's only 24 years old. I honestly thought this guy was a lot older because his time in Pittsburgh felt like forever because of how painful it was to watch. So for a guy that's entering the prime of his career and one of the best offenses in the NFL, I will definitely be happy with George Pickens as A tier. I have him 2 spots higher than the experts. Like I said, put an asterisk around these experts. A lot of them aren't actually experts. None of us are. So a guy I will likely be targeting once again in a lot of my drafts. But kicking off the B tier, we got Drake London, who has kind of been the king of consistency over the last couple of years. He had 919 yards last year, and he only played 12 games. So he was due for a monster season if he didn't get hurt. The year before that had 1,200 yards. The big question mark with Drake London this year is going to be quarterback play, and that's why I have him 2 spots lower than ECR. It's either going to be Tua or Michael Penix. I can't really say I'm excited about either one of them. Tua, obviously, we saw what he's done the last couple of years in Miami. It has not been good. And Michael Penix, when I was watching him last year, I was like, this is one of the most polarizing quarterbacks in the NFL. He would come out against Carolina and he would throw like 4 picks, and then he would ball out the next game and have a massive game. And I'm just like, I don't know how to predict this guy. Once again, like I've said, these are the guys that are very scary to have on your fantasy team because you won't know when to start them or sit them. Now, obviously, Drake London, you'll be starting, but it's tough when you draft wide receiver 1 and you're expecting big numbers, and then he has games where they absolutely bust. So Drake London, I still think he'll be fine, but as you can see, I have him slightly lower than ECR. I still think he'll be an okay pick, and he'll probably put up around 1,000 yards. And obviously, he's a great red zone presence, so always has the upside to get in the end zone as well. But yeah, a guy I'm not necessarily targeting, but I'm not necessarily staying away from. We'll have to see what they do in the NFL draft. Keep monitoring his situation down there in Atlanta. Now, the next guy up is going to be interesting this year. It's Malik Nabers, and as you can see, I am also lower on him than ECR. He tore his ACL in week 4, and unfortunately, we did not get to see him play with Jackson Dart a lot, which is something you would have liked to see. Obviously, Dart comes in week 5, week 6. I can't remember exactly what week it was, but he balled out for the rest of the year and has a lot of hype as well in fantasy this season. So John Harbaugh comes over from the Ravens. I think this is going to be a lot more stable offense and just overall franchise going into this year, and I think they'll be a much better team. Now, we know that Malik Nabers is super talented. One thing that always scares me is I like to target wide receivers the second year removed from their ACL tear. This one happened in week 4, so he basically had the full year to recover, but it's still a little bit scary because you don't know how a guy is going to come out after a big injury. Malik Nabers before the injury, obviously one of the most talented wide receivers in the NFL, and I would have loved to see him stay healthy and rock out. So this one could change as the offseason goes on, admittedly. I'm a huge fan of Nabers' talent. I think he's up there with Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, those type of guys, and the situation just hasn't been great over the last couple of years, but now it's seemingly getting better. We'll just have to monitor his injury status, especially if he misses a couple games to start the year, which has been speculated. He will fall down my ranking significantly. There is a lot of quarterback controversy for Nico Collins. Now, I really wish that Davis Mills just played the whole season here because Nico Collins was phenomenal with him, and CJ Stroud did not look good at all over the second half of last year. We saw the playoff game, obviously, against the Patriots through 4 picks. Looks like one of the worst QBs in the NFL, and I still think he's okay if you give him an offseason to come back and figure stuff out. We've seen him perform at a high level before, but this just happens with a lot of those quarterbacks in their second year, man. We saw it a little bit with Jaden Daniels. I know he was hurt, but Stroud balls out his rookie year, and then the second year, it's a little bit tougher once teams get film on you, but Nico, obviously a beast. I have him 2 spots lower than ECR as well. The whole B tier is just guys that I'm slightly lower on, and then there's some guys in A tier that I'm just super high on. So I don't necessarily hate any of these guys. It's not a total wash. Like, they're not -5 or -6, which would be really concerning, but these are guys I'm definitely not looking to target right now currently if you're doing best ball drafts. This could change as the offseason goes on, like I've said. Now getting into the C tier, and we are zooming through this list, so make sure you drop a follow if you guys want to see fantasy content. I've been grinding all off season. This is a guy I'm super excited about. It is Chris Olave. Now, Chris Olave from weeks 1 through 8 averaged like 12 points per game. He was not very good with Spencer Rattler, who was also just a bad quarterback. I think we can confidently say that at this point of his career. From weeks 9 on, he was averaging 20 fantasy points per game and was the wide receiver 6 in half PPR leagues, an absolute monster over the second half of the season. And he was one of those guys that you remember his fantasy playoff performances. This guy was an absolute beast over the last 3 weeks of the season. And now running it back with the same situation pretty much. He's got Kellen Moore coming back as the head coach. Historically been a great offensive mind. And also Tyler Shough should be returning at quarterback, and he's getting a lot of hype in fantasy as well. So Chris Olave is a guy I'm excited about. I am -1 on him compared to ECR because the one thing I'm slightly concerned about is we've seen players like this before do it for half of a season, and it's kind of this one-off thing, and we've known the type of player they were throughout their career. So I'm still a little bearish on how Tyler Shough is going to come out and be that guy over the whole span of a season. We've seen this before a lot. Like I said earlier, Jaden Daniels, CJ Stroud, guys like that, where you just think they're going to be a baller, and then they come out next year and the whole offense is just deteriorated because they weren't that good. Chris Olave is a guy I'm definitely excited for, but we'll have to see more throughout the offseason. Once again, if they draft a wide receiver, his stock could fall drastically, so something to monitor, but he did have a really cool story last season. Everyone's fantasy rookie of the year last year, Tet McMillan, is coming in at the 13th spot, one spot higher than ECR. And listen, this is a guy like not super exciting. He's still going to be playing with Bryce Young, which I don't know how I feel about that just yet. He did ball out in the playoffs, but we've kind of seen Bryce Young be super polarizing over the last couple of years. But Tet McMillan was the fantasy rookie of the year last year, which isn't saying much. Honestly, it was a pretty rough rookie class, but I think he'll be fine once again. This offense at least has promise, and I'm a huge believer in Dave Canales. So another year under the system, another year with Bryce Young, teams can start to form pretty good chemistry, and I think Tet McMillan will be perfectly fine for fantasy. I don't have a whole lot to say about this one, but I was shocked to see Davante Adams as the ECR number 19, which is crazy to me. I know he's getting old, and I know his hammies are kind of cooked at this point of his career. Like, there's a decent chance he gets injured, but I never really like to predict injuries because there's something that is super tough in fantasy. I have him 5 spots higher than ECR just because it's pretty simple. Like, he was one of the best red zone threats and the best offense in the NFL last year, and he had 14 touchdowns through week 15, and it's like, how is that guy not going to be a high-end wide receiver 2 or a fringe wide receiver 1? So Adams is the guy I will likely be targeting once again, especially if you can get him in the 5th or 6th round. Like, that's definitely worth a hit because you need upside to win your fantasy championships. I'm not here to get 2nd or 3rd. I am here to win my chip, and a guy like Davante Adams, if he can stay healthy for a full year, is a guy that can definitely do that. But moving on to a floor guy, we got T. Higgins. This is honestly a super boring pick, which is exactly why I have him equal to ECR. This is never a guy with Jamar Chase healthy that's going to ball out and go and win you a fantasy championship, but he is a super safe wide receiver 2. Wide receiver 2s and offenses this good will continue to perform, so I'm fine with T. Higgins once again. If you'd pick him, I picked him last year. He was fine for me. And if Jamar Chase gets hurt, this guy's a legitimate league winner, but not a guy like I'm super excited about when I'm hitting drafts. So if you want to go for some upside, pick a guy like Adams, Tet, McMillan, Olave. But if you get stuck with Higgins, I wouldn't even say stuck. He's still a fine pick, but definitely more of a floor guy here. One of the craziest stats to me of this last season was Zay Flowers being the wide receiver 9, which is ridiculous. I didn't think he was that good really at all this year, but he ended up being insane and finishing as a wide receiver 1. And with Lamar Jackson, he averaged 15 points per game last year, so obviously much better with him than he was with Cooper Rush, where he averaged just 10 points per game. And people forget about those splits too. Rush started for like 5 games while Lamar was hurt, and obviously the whole offense was just terrible. Now, obviously, the bottleneck with Zay Flowers is the touchdowns. He's never scored more than 5 touchdowns, and last year was not an exception. In PPR leagues, he's definitely a way better option than if you're in half PPR or standard. But yeah, I have him 2 spots higher than ECR because I think 16 is still a lot lower than he should be. Yeah, not a guy that I'm expecting to have a ton of boom weeks due to the low touchdown consumption, but he'll be great once again. I am a big fan of drafting good players and good offenses, and he definitely fits that bill, so I'm not worried about him whatsoever. I think he'll be a good middle round pick. Also, something to note, the best way to decipher between these players and C tiers is to look at their season long lines. If you go on Underdog and you see that one guy has higher yards lines and higher touchdowns than the other guy, then it's probably the guy you want to pick, barring a crazy reception difference. I'm sure they'll drop reception lines as well as the offseason goes on. So just make sure you're studying up on that because that's a great way to get ahead of your league mates and decipher who's going to be good in these middle round wide receiver tiers who are historically a very tricky part of your draft. AJ Brown went over 1,000 yards last year and had 7 touchdowns, but it was not really signaling of how he actually was as a player. This guy was unstartable for most of his weeks, and it was really annoying because he would boom and bust and you just didn't know who was getting fed in this Eagles offense, who was super underwhelming. So although he was okay, like he still finished as a wide receiver 2, this guy was super frustrating to have on your team last year. Now, this is a guy I kind of hate ranking right now because I don't even know if he'll be on the Eagles by the time the year starts. They have had a lot of beef over the last couple seasons, hence why I have him 4 spots lower than ECR. Obviously, I still believe in the talent, but for a guy that just was super disappointing last year compared to where you drafted him, and me being unsure if he'll even still be on the team, not really believing in their offensive coordinator if he is still on the team, it's just a lot of moving parts parts here. We still have the draft. So there's a lot of question marks for A.J. Brown this offseason that need to be answered before I feel comfortable ranking him any higher. Garrett Wilson obviously does not fit the bill of drafting good players and good offenses. He has one of the two. He is a phenomenal player, but I do have him 2 spots lower than ECR just because that other half is very polarizing. He is in a terrible offense. Same reason why I had Breece Hall ranks lower. I just don't really drafting guys where their touchdown upside is going to be super low, but he had a 33% target share last year, and Justin Fields obviously not a great throwing quarterback one bit. So I think that's about as bad as the quarterback play could get. With Geno Smith coming over, it could be okay. Like I have a little bit of hope. Tyrod Taylor was obviously okay with Garrett Wilson last year when those two played together, and Geno Smith is a similar type of player. So Garrett Wilson is a guy like I'm not completely off of if you can get him as maybe a flex spot, wide receiver 2 floor play, especially in PPR leagues. He'll be much better because he'll be getting that volume. I don't necessarily mind it. Hopping into the D tier, we got Luther Burden now with DJ Moore out of town, which should free up a lot of targets. It's going to be him, Rome Odunze, and Colston Loveland really rocking out in the Chicago offense. And Burden had a 2.69 yards per route run last year, which was the highest of any rookie with 50 plus targets since Odell Beckham Jr. I think he's a good player, man. I really think this guy can ball. They took him super high last year for a reason, even though he sat for most of the year. Now, the one thing you are going to have to worry about is there is a lot of mouths to feed in this offense. Obviously, Rome Odunze tailed off towards the second half of last year, but I still think he's a great player, and the emergence of Colston Loveland over the second half of last year was something to really note. Loveland was an absolute baller. So while Burden will be a cool pick, he kind of just fits the bill of that second-year wide receiver in a great offense that could be poised to break out. And at the end of the year, you look back and you're like, this guy had the draft capital, and he was super talented, and he was in a good offense, and you're like, why didn't I just pick this guy? So a guy that you're more shooting for upside here, but he could end up being a top 10 wide receiver. I think that is definitely in the range of possibilities. So someone to note here, I have him 1 spot higher than ECR, so I obviously like Luther Burden somewhat. Getting into the next guy, we got Mike Evans, and I made this joke before, but it's kind of corny now. It's all over Twitter, but I'm making it again. His hammies are cooked next to that electronic substation, even though they said it's not really that big of a deal. So maybe Evans is back. Let's see. But I have him 5 spots higher than ECR, which is very high compared to all the other guys on this list. The only other 2 guys that are that high are Devontae Adams and Rashee Rice. And listen, he absolutely smashed his landing spot this offseason. The 49ers obviously lost George Kittle, so that's a big red zone presence and a guy that's taking up a bunch of targets. And now Evans comes in, and he's going to be the wide receiver 1 in this offense and the best goal line option they have, which is super important because this 49ers offense scores a lot of touchdowns. So something you need to look at here, his touchdown line when it drops on underdog is going to be absolutely fat, I'm projecting. And I love Evans here, even if he has the chance of getting hurt. He is older, but I mean, when your top target competition is Ricky Pearsall, I'm not really worried about how you're going to finish in fantasy as long as you stay healthy. And like we said, we do not like to predict injuries here. Getting to the next guy who was super disappointing this last season, and it was Emeka Egbuka. Something to note though, I talked about it last year on the betting show that I host on BDGE with Gut. Shout out them, go check them out. I just got back from a flag football game in Coastal Carolina with them, but Emeka Egbuka hurt his hamstring in week 6, and they kind of rushed him back. He played the next week, and we were both very skeptical about it. I mean, it seems a little early to rush a rookie back from, especially with how hamstring injuries are. They're super tedious and super vulnerable to re-aggravation. Egbuka averaged 20 points per game from weeks 1 through 5, and then after that completely fell off a cliff. From week 7 on, he averaged just 11.5 PPR points per game, and it was really weird. It seemed like his talent kind of got zapped from him after this hamstring injury. And now with Mike Evans gone, he'll be leading this wide receiver room. And I think people are sleeping a little bit. I think he'll be really good once again. And now that he has a full offseason to get healthy, I'm super excited about Egbuka. I have him 5 spots higher than ECR, similar to Evans. There are some guys in this D range that I absolutely love. And this Bucs offense is good, man. They'll probably be top 10 to top 15, maybe even higher. They've had the upside to show that they can be a top 10 offense before. So Baker Mayfield, obviously a good quarterback to have on your side. And I love Egbuka this year. He's going to be one of my most drafted players, unless they do something in a draft to absolutely ruin it. Don't do that. Let Egbuka rock out, man. Kicking off the E tier, we have Terry McLaurin, and I have him 2 spots higher than ECR. I'm basically washing last year for the Commanders. It was a shit show of a year. Jaden Daniels got hurt. Terry McLaurin was hurt for most of the year. They had a super tough schedule because they finished high in their division the year prior. It was just an all-around weird year. I think they could go back to the form that they were the year before last, where they were really good and Terry was humming. Now, the one thing that does scare me a little bit is that he is turning 31 years old this year, which is obviously super old for a wide receiver past his prime, but Terry's a baller, man, and he hasn't really shown any sign of slowing down. He was still good when he came back from injury last year, and if Jaden Daniels could stay healthy for a full year, I'm super excited about what these two guys can do. And I'm not gonna lie, Devontae Smith is one of the most boring picks in fantasy. This motherfucker does the same shit every single year, and it's like people are surprised when he's not top 15 again. He's going to be in that 20 to 24 range, and as you can see, I have him 2 spots lower than ECR just because this guy's not exciting one bit. Like, I want to draft exciting players, and I want to have guys on my squad that have the potential to finish top 15, and unless AJ Brown gets hurt or traded, that is not happening. So I'm fine with DeVonta Smith if you want a safe flex play. He looks at you in the 5th or 6th round like Sidney Sweeney, and you're just like, that guy's going to have such a safe floor, but just not a guy I really want on my squad at this point. I've drafted him the last 2 years, and he hasn't really done shit, so I'm fine with him as a flex play, floor play, but I'm not a guy I'm actively targeting in my drafts, and probably a guy I won't be as the summer goes on. Now, Ladd McConkey, who was one of the biggest busts from last offseason, and this was really unfortunate to see. I had a ton of hype for him going into last year. I thought he was going to be amazing, but it was just a battle to fight for target competition with all these other wide receivers. We thought Ladd McConkey was going to be the 1A, but it was a 1A, B, C, and D with Quentin Johnston, Oronde Gadsden, Keenan Allen, all those guys there who all balled out and had decent years, but none of them were really that good because towards the end of the season, it was tough to decide which one of them to start. They really spread the ball around last year, and I'm not very high on Ladd McConkey once again. I have him 7 spots lower than ECR, and it's kind of just because everyone's returning. I expect Oronde Gadsden to take a year 2 leap from what he did last season. They really believe in this guy, and I think with another offseason there, he'll command a lot more targets. Quentin Johnston is still there, obviously. Keenan Allen, we'll have to see what he does. He's old as dirt. I don't really know if he'll be returning to the team, but I don't think he'll be super hard to replace target-wise. The one plus that Ladd McConkey definitely has is that Mike McDaniel came over from Miami, and I love Mike McDaniel, but I like him more for the running backs rather than the wide receivers. I think Amarian Hampton is going to be an absolute beast this year, so McConkey just not a guy I'm really going to target here. But Jalen Waddle moving over to the Broncos is something that is very interesting. I wasn't expecting this to happen. It kind of caught me out of nowhere. I was at the gym, and I was starting to think about it. I was like, this might not actually be that bad. Obviously, Courtland Sutton is still going to be there, and he's still going to be super safe. Sutton actually last year, despite being terrible some weeks, he kind of had the AJ Brown situation going on where he was like boom or bust, but he was still a top 24 wide receiver, and I think he'll have a safe floor once again. They just love Courtland Sutton. He's one of the team captains on this team and a guy that's just been there forever, and Sean Payton loves him, so he's going to get the rock. If I'm not mistaken, they released Troy Franklin, so that should open up some targets for Jalen Waddle. Jalen Waddle's a great player, man. I think this is a great in real life signing. He's kind of been hid behind Tyreek Hill over the last couple of years in a weird situations in Miami, to say the least, where it's been a little rocky over there over the last couple of years. So now coming into a stable franchise, got Sean Payton. Obviously, this offense is going to be humming, as we know. So once again, we'll have to see what they do in the draft. But Waddle, I have him 2 spots lower than ECR right now, but I could definitely see that moving throughout the offseason. I think he is a great player. DJ Moore heading over to the Bills, and this is a guy that I will be targeting in a lot of drafts, even though he is 28 years old and he's kind of tailing into the back half of his career where he starts to decline a little bit. I just want good players and good offenses, man. I think DJ Moore is a good player, and out of all the guys in this tier, especially the ones that are coming after him, I would rather take a swing on upside in a guy in a good offense than a guy where we already kind of know who they are, like DeVonta Smith per se. So Moore heading to the Bills, obviously one of the best offenses in the NFL. They just haven't really produced for fantasy wide receivers over the last couple of years, but they haven't really had good wide receivers. They've been cycling through Josh Palmer, Keon Coleman, guys like that who just haven't been good. So Khalil Shakir will definitely still be there and will definitely still be a massive part of this offense. But I think DJ Moore could serve as the 1A here, with Shakir being the 1B. And in the middle to later rounds of my drafts, these are guys I want to take the swings on. Especially if you're doing best ball drafts right now, these are the guys that could have top 15 finishes and really set you apart from other people in your leagues. Talking about boomer bust, we have Jameson Williams, who is the definition of that. Like I said, I just don't like guys like this on my team when I don't know when to start them and when I don't know when to sit them. And honestly, their offense is so good. They pick the weeks that they want to be good and bad. Like, even if it's a tough matchup, Jameson Williams will ball out and you'll be like, I should have started him. It'll be an easy matchup and Amon-Ra will get the 3 touchdowns. There's a lot of mouths to feed in this offense, first of all. And Jameson Williams is a great upside play if you need to throw in a guy for your flex to like pop off and win you a week, but you don't get that all the time. And this guy also has league losing ability to go along with that league winning ability. He's in a great offense, so I know it kind of contradicts what I said earlier, but Williams is an exception. Everyone that plays fantasy knows this guy is complete boomer bust, so I have him 5 spots lower than ECR, and likely a guy I will not be picking a lot of as the summer goes on. Finishing out the E tier, we have Courtland Sutton, who, like I said earlier in this tier, is just a guy with a safe floor. He's going to be good once once again. He was a top 24 wide receiver last year. Probably not going to be super exciting. He's going to have his weeks where he's good. He's going to have his weeks where he's bad. Not a guy I'm terribly uncomfortable with taking at 28, especially because he fits the good player and good offense mold, which I said I like. So Courtland Sutton, not a guy I'm terribly against, but not a guy I'll necessarily be targeting either. Kicking off the F tier, we got DK Metcalf. The Steelers bring in Michael Pittman this offseason to complement him, which is probably a bad thing. They didn't really have a lot of target competition last year, and now he finally has some in an offense that was already super run heavy. We don't know what they're doing at quarterback. I don't know how their offensive coordinator is going to be. So a lot of question marks for DK Metcalf that are not answered. I'll need more answering as the season goes on if I want to be the person drafting him. Rome Odunze coming in at number 30, one spot lower than ECR, and I am slightly concerned about Rome this year. He completely fell off over the second half of last year, and he is probably going to be the third option on this team that I do expect their offense to regress a little bit as their schedule gets harder, obviously with them being a playoff team last year. So not a guy I'm actively going to be targeting. He has proven he can be good with Caleb Williams, so something to note there. If you want to take a late round flyer on him, I don't necessarily hate it. Getting into the next guy, Alec Pierce, who got the absolute bag this offseason, and now Michael Pittman is out of town. So they not only gave him the big contract, they were like, hey, you're really good, we're giving you this massive contract, but we're also shipping off our number one target because we think you're that good. So I love following the actions, not the words of these teams. And the actions of the Colts this offseason was Alec Pierce is our wide receiver 1, and he's going to be the guy we want complimenting Tyler Warren to run this offense. Daniel Jones, it is going to be a debate whether he's back for week 1, and if they have Anthony Richardson starting, it's definitely going to be a little wishy-washy over the first couple weeks. But if Daniel Jones can play a majority of the year, he was really good with Alec Pierce over the span of the season. So Alec Pierce, as a guy I have 9 spots higher than ECR, which is the highest of any player on this list. Obviously, watch what they do in the NFL draft. If they sign someone else, this could change. But as of right now, if you're picking him in best ball as well, he's a great best ball pick because this guy catches a lot of deep balls and he has a lot of boom weeks and a lot of mediocre weeks. But Alec Pierce is a guy I love at his ADP this offseason. Moving on, we got Christian Watson, who I have 5 spots lower than ECR. Now, Romeo Doubs does move out of town, and Christian Watson will likely be the wide receiver 1 here. But the thing about the Packers pass catchers is it doesn't really seem to matter who is in-house. They always spread the ball around. Whether it's Dontavion Wicks, Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, who obviously I said is out of town now, but I'm sure they'll bring in someone else. Matthew Golden in his year 2 after they took him in the first round. They're going to spread the ball around, and this is going to be a very tough offense to predict once again. You'll likely get more signaling of who's balling out in training camp and to start the year, who is getting a majority of the targets, and usually it remains somewhat constant. So this offense is good, and you do want to have some pieces of it, but I would rather just take Golden at a later price, as I think he has more promise and he could finish similar to what Watson did last year for a much cheaper price. Now, Michael Wilson, who is one of the most polarizing players from last season, from weeks 1 through 5 with Kyler Murray, he averaged just 4 points per game. And then after that with Jacoby Brissett, he averaged almost 17 fantasy points per game. And Brissett is returning as the quarterback for the Cardinals this year. Now, a lot of those games were without Marvin Harrison Jr. There will be a lot more target competition with Marvin Harrison there. Obviously, Trey McBride is still there as well, who was amazing with Jacoby Brissett as well. So Michael Wilson is not going to be the 17 points per game player that he was last year, but I think he could still be okay and take over this wide receiver 1 spot from Marvin Harrison, who has been very disappointing as a player for the Cardinals. I have him 4 spots higher than ECR, mostly for upside. Like, we saw what he can do with Jacoby Brissett, and if Jacoby Brissett starts locking onto him and making him the number 1 target, if he gets into that 11-12 points per game range, that's all you're looking for the wide receiver 33. But like I said, with a full offseason of Marvin Harrison working in and getting more healthy than he was last year, this is likely going to be a even distribution between the 3 of them. I would project Trey McBride's getting a ton of targets, probably Michael Wilson second, and even with Marvin Harrison Jr. for the 2 wide receiver targets. Moving on, we got Ricky Pearsall, who is a guy I've equal to the ECR. This is a guy I'm somewhat excited about. You know, he's had a really bad run out for his entire career. He got shot his rookie year, in and out of injuries. I picked him, and he had that PCL injury, which felt like it lingered on forever. And now George Kittle goes down. They bring in Mike Evans for some target competition, but he could be the 1B in one of the best offenses in the NFL. So this is something to note. If you believe in his talent, I do not mind a flyer here at all. I would probably be taking a flyer on him around this range as well. I think he is a solid player, and he could absolutely break out and have a good year, top 24 year, to salvage the bad taste in your mouth from last season. Moving on to the G tier, we got Parker Washington, man, who was an absolute beast over the second half of last year, and ECR is projecting this to be an even split between him, Brian Thomas Jr., and Jacoby Myers, and I think Parker Washington might just be the best receiver in this room and finish ahead of those 2 guys. I mean, he did it last year, so why can't he do it again? But he is the lowest of the 3 right now, which is ridiculous to me. He was insane down the stretch of last year and even balled out in their playoff game. So this is a guy they really believe in, and I think he'll be great once again for the Jaguars. Moving on, we got his buddy, his teammate Brian Thomas Jr., who obviously a lot of fantasy players are pissed at. He was terrible last season and he was a first-round pick, so he left a lot of bad taste in your mouth. Not a guy I'm completely out on this year. You can get him at a crazy value, and he did just rock out in his rookie year. I know a lot of that was with Mac Jones, but not a guy I'm willing to give up on after 1 year. He had some injuries and he had a lot of confidence issues that I'm hoping he can get figured out going into this year, because I think he's a phenomenal player and the Jaguars could be a phenomenal in real life team if he gets it together. But we'll just have to monitor the reports throughout training camp. If it comes out that he's the guy he was his rookie year, then definitely could be flying up my draft boards, but we'll just have to see. Finishing out the G tier, we have Marvin Harrison Jr., who has been really disappointing in his time in Arizona. I'm not gonna lie, man. The quarterback change from Kyler Murray to Jacoby Brissett could help this a little bit and make him a better option for fantasy, but I just don't really see it, especially if Michael Wilson and Trey McBride can stay healthy. I think he's going to be the third option on this team, surprisingly, which is something I never thought I would say before the last 2 seasons. I thought he was the one coming into the league. So Marvin Harrison Jr., not a guy I'm really going to be targeting in my draft. I don't really expect him to turn it around at this point, because although Kyler Murray is bad, I don't think he is that bad. Starting off the H tier, we got Wan'Dale Robinson, Quandale Dingle, coming over from New York Giants and reuniting with Brian Daboll, which should be an exciting project once again. Now, this is really going to come down to if Cam Ward can be a somewhat good quarterback. I know last year Brian Callahan was an absolute mess. Like, this was not a good offense that you wanted to be in, and I do still believe in Cam Ward as a quarterback, so I think this will be a fun little situation here, and there's a chance that they pepper Wan'Dale with targets like they did in New York and make it easy for their second-year quarterback. So Wan'Dale, not a bad pick at all. I don't think anyone's expecting him to be an alpha, so this is more of a floor play in a PPR league if you have the opportunity to pick him. Moving on, we got Michael Pittman Jr. moving over from Indianapolis to Pittsburgh, and let's be real, he got sent to hell. This Steelers situation is not good right now. Like I said with DK Metcalf, don't know who the quarterback is, don't really believe in the offensive coordinator, and now he's got target competition with DK Metcalf, so not a guy I'll be picking a lot of. Probably will be one of my biggest fades of this offseason. Even though I have him equal to ECR right now, this will be a guy that will likely be moving down my rankings as the season goes on. Finishing out the H tier, we got Carnell Tate, first rookie hopping on this board. We'll have to see where he lands. This is going to be a landing spot play. Can't really say much about draft picks when you don't know where they're going to land. Thank you guys for watching this wide receiver tier list. If you're new, make sure you like and subscribe. I'll be posting fantasy videos all off season. Peace.